And welcome to a Degenerate Friday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForrest. Very happy to have you guys with us as we begin trying to make winners out of people and ourselves in 2025, a brand new year. We always like that. Now, if you wipe the slate clean and you did the tallying, which I find a very futile and frustrating exercise to try to figure out whether you ended up ahead or behind for 2024, and there are some people probably made a big score somewhere along the line. Maybe you picked up 25, 50,000. You hit a pick six for 72 dimes. Let's face it, if that was the case, then you should have come out ahead for 2024. But if you found yourself literally buried, swimming in a vast sea of red ink, almost like, remember on Fear Factor, before Joe Rogan was an international celebrity, and he was just a host that you looked at on this quiz show or, I guess, reality show that you thought to yourself, man, that's insane. I'm not going off the high board like I was Greg Louganis off some platform 25 feet above a vat of squid ink, and diving in there. Forget about that. That's not me. But if you're swimming in a sea of red ink after 2024, you have come to the right place. No, this is not a Gamblers Anonymous meeting, but it is going to be an attempt here in 2025 to at least give you some kind of guidance, a thought process that you can base some of your selections on. Let's face it, in gambling, in life, you're essentially on your own. But while we may not pick every game on the right side or have the correct opinion on a variety of prop bets, we're going to try to give you some ideas here in 2025. So if you come to the right place, and now I know I've walked out of racetracks many times, sports books, thinking, fuck, I just lost a refrigerator or an appliance. And if you put it in that context, it's kind of rough to justify these losses as discretionary entertainment dollars. But let's face it, it's a lot of fun. It can be very addictive, and we're hoping that we have an addiction to winning for you here in 2025. If you are betting these games, and there was a lot of stuff, a lot of action over the weekend, all sports, but especially on the college and professional gridiron, and we have the final week of the NFL, a very mysterious card to try to handicap for you. We're going to get some insight into the college games and talk about the playoff games that have taken place so far. So far, chalk, huh? There was one underdog that covered the spread. That was Arizona State. I was involved in that game. And other than that, all four favorites won on the money line and 3-1 if you were playing against the spread. So you chalk players out there came out of it in pretty good shape. If you are betting the games, though, Bet Online continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, very popular right now. They provide you at Bet Online with all the action, the ability to watch the games as they happen, as well as bet on them. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, and college basketball, NHL, UFC, boxing, whatever it is that you want to wager on, they have it. Head to Bet Online today. Don't forget to use the promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. That's all in caps, one of our affiliates, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. All right, much of the excitement and the betting action was centered around the college football playoff games that took place over the weekend. We welcome to the show for the first time in 2025. Also, maybe with a little bit of an etch-a-sketch on his wagering ledgers here from the college football season, trying to wipe the slate clean. We welcome in the professor, ladies and gentlemen, to our Degenerate Friday edition of Your Bookie. Professor, looking good. How are you, my friend? How are your holidays?
I'm good. How are yours?
Good, nice and quiet. Stayed home New Year's Eve. I don't do a lot of New Year's Eve anymore. Ever
Me
since,
neither.
yeah. I mean, I'll never forget this. We when we were doing talk radio, had a frequent caller that went by the tag of Mitch the Cabbie, and Mitch the Cabbie would call in usually after an all-night shift. He'd call in early in the morning and give his opinions on sports, and he was a pretty good sports fan. So I felt like, wow, let me give Mitch the Cabbie a break. He's been such a loyal listener and caller to my shows over the years. So I tell Mitch the Cabbie, hey, I'll give you $300. I just need you to drive me to and from a restaurant that was about 15 miles from the house. So take me there at about 8 o'clock when we were getting ready to go and celebrate New Year's Eve and pick me up a little bit after midnight. I don't care what you do in between. You want to wait there, fine. Or you don't, that's okay. So he says, yeah, that's great, 300. So he had already blown the 300 at Dania Highlight before he ever got to the house.
As
And
one is wont to do.
yeah, and then, of course, he shows up, and he's like stoned out of his mind, this guy. I don't know what he was taking, but it was something even Timothy Leary might have found suspect. So I'm very uncomfortable on the ride down to this place. There was a restaurant called Michael's Kitchen in Hollywood, very good place.
I remember it actually.
Yeah, it was a good spot. And then on the way back, we come outside and we find Mitch the cabbie is passed out in the back seat of his car, of the cab, actual yellow taxi cab. This was before Uber and Lyft became popular.
Right.
And so, sure enough, my only option was to actually drive the cab home myself. So that's how I ended up. I paid the guy 3 sticks. I ended up driving a cab, which is highly illegal, not licensed to do it. And then Mitch the cabbie ended up sleeping at my house that night. So
I was about to ask, did you take his cab back out to make you 3 sticks back up on New Year's Eve?
I should have just driven some people to the airport, and I would have been okay. But
No, a friend of mine, and he doesn't drive Uber, but like just on New Year's Eve, he does it every year for like 5 hours, and he makes, $400 or $500 in 5 hours. How you gonna beat it? $100 an hour to drive people around.
it's a beautiful thing if you can get it going. But yeah, I was just happy because I didn't realize what kind of criminal offense I was getting involved in by sitting behind the wheel of a taxi cab without a hacker's hack license. But
Right nowadays, anybody can do it.
yeah. So yeah, New Year's Eve became a no-go for me, in terms of going out and celebrating in that fashion. And of course, we do have to. I mean, I've been on Bourbon Street a few times on New Year's Eve covering Sugar Bowl games, and I think one time just to go to New Orleans because it's a great place to celebrate. And wow, I mean, what a tragedy, and we would be remiss if we didn't mention that and the memory of the people there, and of course, in the spirit of New Orleans, that they bounce right back. But yeah, just a very, very horrific experience there for anybody that's been there and knows what it's like. And the last thing you're expecting is to get mowed down by some guy with an ISIS flag driving a truck at 100 miles an hour on Bourbon Street in a big crowd.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So they did play the game the next day, and your thoughts so far? It's been Shock City for the most part with these games.
I mean, I guess you would call it chalk. What I would say is it's been public city. Every consistent line move because of the public, because the publics have been, flooding the windows, has won and won pretty easy. I mean, Ohio State, Oregon, every member of the public was all over the over. It went over middle third quarter, end of the third quarter. Yesterday, Notre Dame went from +2 and a hook to -1. The action was pretty easy win. I mean, honestly, I would say to some degree, the playoffs have gone pretty much exactly to script. The notable exception would be that Arizona State-Texas game. I will say I've been wrong in a couple of the spots. I thought Boise would hang around with Penn State, and I think they actually kind of did, but Penn State got that
did for a little while. They were still within range of covering.
I mean, Penn State got that late touchdown run to cover the game. But generally in this round, it's been the more traditional, I guess you'd say, name schools, with a Penn State, with a Notre Dame, with a Texas, with an Ohio State. And the round before that, it was the home teams. And, I don't know how we're going to react to this because, there's, of course, all sorts of – the first round, the SEC fans were all crying that, we needed 3 more SEC teams. But then those SEC teams went out and humiliated themselves in the bowls, and everybody was laughing at Kirk Herbstreit. And maybe it's just, you need to look at when you're dealing with like top 10 teams in college football on their home field, they're going to win like 95% of the time on their home field. And, the fact that you've got not only home field winners, but home field blowouts maybe makes some sense, particularly when you throw, a couple of weather factors in there. Second round, again, for the most part, favorites won. They just happen to be in a couple of cases. In the case of Georgia, because of a backup quarterback, and in the case of
you said that kid was horrible, by the way, and
he was
didn't help the cause. That's for sure.
I thought for about a quarter and a half, Georgia genuinely surprised the Notre Dame defense because they were willing to throw the ball downfield with him, and I thought Notre Dame's game plan pretty clearly looked like a team that didn't think Georgia was going to throw at all. They were playing heavy boxes, 8-9 men boxes. And spying the kid on pretty much every drop back. But after that, I thought Notre Dame's defense pretty much dominated the game.
They had those 2 plays, one right before the half where they recovered the fumble, go in, nice strike thrown there by Riley Leonard.
And again,
and then you get the kickoff return.
I mean, the fumble set up by the fact that clearly this kid has not played a lot of football in a long time,
Yeah.
and has no pocket presence. But I mean, he did not feel there were two different sacks, but that one in particular because of the fumble, he did not feel that guy for coming from behind at all.
No.
Um,
He did appear to be hanging on to the ball into perpetuity, as they say, and no sense whatsoever of the problems that he was facing. So, but those two plays obviously were the big swing in the ball game, and it was an uphill climb for Georgia, and then they get stopped on the 4th and goal from the 3-yard line late in the game when it was 20-10. So there was still a shot there, 23-10, still a shot that they could come back. And
I mean, yes and no, because that
those-
whole situation was created by 4th and 13 conversion on a very shaky pass interference call that I thought really fit a pattern of I won the game, so I'm not bitching about it, but I thought fit a pattern of one-sided officiating throughout that game. It looked several times like the refs were trying to keep Georgia kind of in that one to create a game.
the ref did look a little bit like Lou Holtz. You're right.
So we had that situation, and then Ohio State, comes in as a favorite despite being the lower seed against an undefeated number 1 Oregon who had beat them earlier in the year.
Yeah.
And through 2 playoff games, it looks like Ryan Day has finally decided to stay out of his own team's way and, realized at some point after the Michigan game, oh, I'm paying Chip Kelly $4 million a year to be the offensive coordinator. I should let him do his job. I should let him come up with the game plan. And Ohio State looks more like the team that they, recruited and spent a lot of NIL money for than they did really at any point during the regular season.
In that Michigan game, they took a shot at Chip Kelly, and he was in a straitjacket. He couldn't believe that Ryan Day was going to run the ball and try and slug it out.
Again, this has been the problem with Ryan Day through the years, particularly against Michigan. And a couple of years ago, Notre Dame, he gets into these big games, and he decides, despite it's not his background at all. I mean, you coached under Urban Meyer, was very wide open, but he gets into these big games, and he wants to be Woody fucking Hayes in 2024. Yeah. And it's an insane, given that your strength at recruiting has been wide receivers for like your whole time there, the weakness of your team is your interior offensive line, and you want to, pretend Archie Griffin's in the backfield, run up the middle 52 times. So we're so tough.
Right, straight ahead.
So now Ohio State has gone from, wouldn't have made a 14 playoff to now the consensus favorite to win the national title because they opened the offense back up.
Yeah.
And then capped off last night with the easiest storyline maybe ever, which is Lane Kiffin being the biggest dick he can possibly be. I mean, look, I suppose it's possible that there's some game where Ratface tagged Ole Miss in basketball, but who the hell feels the need to run up the score against Duke in football? Maybe there's some revenge there I don't know about, possibly related to a basketball team. But, you leave your starters in to throw another touchdown pass when what was it? It wasn't, that was 44-15 or something at that point, something insane like that.
They already had the over, so if he was betting the over, that couldn't have been the incentive.
No, I think the incentive was purely like Lane Kiffin being as big a jerk off as he can possibly be. I never personally met Monty. Monty always seemed like kind of a laid back, he
was a classic salty dog,
cerebral coach.
Yeah.
But so I don't know if it's like, hidden in Lane Kiffin's genes or somewhere. But, what a jerk. I mean, I don't know another way to express his consistent pattern of behavior, again, exemplified last night by leaving Jackson Dart in. And let's remember, this is a guy who's already ruined a kid's career playing him in a meaningless ball game at Ole Miss. People forget a few years ago, Matt Corral took a devastating injury in the Sugar Bowl, went from a kid who was probably going to be like an early second-round pick to falling all the way down the board. And I think last I heard it was in the XFL now.
Yeah, he gets a little bit of a free pass from me. I understand all of the logic behind your labeling of Lane Kiffin as a classic dick. I'm not a huge fan of running up the score, leaving your starters in there. I mean, it's a ball game of very little significance outside of maybe putting one more win on Lane Kiffin's resume. But and Duke has a backup quarterback in there. They had a pretty good season actually under Manny Diaz, to the surprise of many people. But
Myself included.
I'll never forget. I was in a conglomerate there, a pool of radio stations that were in the building there at iHeartMedia in Miami. And one of the big stars, a guy named Paul Castronova of Big 105, which was their big moneymaker in the cluster, as they call it, comes to me and he says, "Hey, you won't believe this. I ran into Lane Kiffin at the gym that I go to in Boca." And I'm like, "Okay. I mean, how was he?" You're thinking the guy was just going to be an indifferent, sort of insufferable jerk. And he says, he said, "Oh, you work at that radio station? I'm a big fan." So Castronova was, kind of feeling a little bit of glory there. Oh, wow, Lane Kiffin listens to my show. He says, yeah, I listen all the time to that guy Defo. And I was like, what? Here's Lane. So, I mean, and no doubt you had made many appearances and probably some Lane Kiffin references.
I probably called him a dick on the air too.
Yeah. So
might not use the word dick, but I probably expressed the
I
same
was
sentiment.
Hopefully, Castronova, mentioned to Kiffin, oh, by the way, that guy, the professor, he's on his own wavelength.
Yeah, he's not Tifo's guy.
Yeah, but no, it really. I mean, when you think about it, I'm looking at the game, it was like 45-7, and I think the over under was 51 on a hook. And I thought, well, there really is little reason to continue to pour it on here. Although maybe Manny Diaz, when he was at Miami,
like I said, there may be something we don't know about either between Diaz and Kiffin. Oh, you know what? I wonder if they were both on the staffs of Texas and USC during that Rose Bowl.
Could
that
be.
would be one to look back to.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it seemed clear. This was Jimmy rubbing it in the face of Jerry Fauster, whereas Eric Parsegian was puking in the booth to Brent Musburger that, this is ridiculous. This is unsportsmanlike. And you're like, get the fuck out of here, Eric. How many times did you do that to Trinity College when you were up 70 points and you kept running?
I take a little deep tack. I think if you're Bobby Bowden, as he used to run scores up, but he always did it with his second and third teamers. And if you couldn't stop the third team quarterback, and Spurrier honestly was the same thing. He would still pass the ball. Bowden would still pass the ball up 50 points, but they do it with backups. And their attitude was, look, don't get to play very much. Sure. If you can't stop my third team offense, sorry, it is what it is.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of whining about running up scores if you're the opposition either, because you know what? Get out there and find a way to stop them. I don't care if you're down 30. Don't let them make it 37.
Keeping the starters in that situation is what bugs me.
Yes.
And again, this
Gino
is a guy
syndrome.
Yeah, this is a guy who got a starting QB hurt a few years ago.
Yeah.
In a slack game. So whatever.
All right. So it sets up a couple of good matchups.
It does.
State Notre Dame game certainly has a great element of curiosity as to what.
As I've heard it called down here in the Orange Bowl.
Yeah.
You got Notre Dame, of course, representing the Catholic Church. You got Penn State. It's basically the Jeffrey Epstein Bowl.
Now, did we ever? Whatever.
If you live down here, you happen to have a preteen boy, you might want to keep him inside for the next week or two.
I was thinking I badly whiffed on a score for 2025 early on because our good buddy Tony Segreto,
I know,
sportscaster,
Louie and I were talking about that.
8 tickets to the Orange Bowl game at face value.
Yes.
He desperately needed to get rid of since he's on the Orange Bowl committee and had to buy them. And I'm thinking, why didn't I buy all 8 of those with Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl in a semifinal college playoff game? How much would those be worth?
Double anyway.
Yeah, I would imagine thousands for these tickets. And if Segreto was smart, he'll hang on to them. He'll be outside the stadium by the turnpike exit there. Trying to scalp them. All right, so what do you make of the matchups, Professor? You got Ohio State favored by 6 over Texas. Texas has not been overwhelmingly impressive in their last few ball games. And I literally, having Arizona State plus 13.5 when they got down 16, I was ready to rent an airboat and go halfway out into the Everglades. We've got a little freezing element working here with the Professor. Hopefully you're still with us, or you might want to
I'm right here.
Punch back in or something because you
hear me, Dave?
Coming out in mosaic here. But the Ohio State Texas game, Ohio State favored by 6. Probably deservingly so, the way they've handled their last 2 opponents.
Uh, okay, tough matchup here. Texas really has not played a complete football game since September, since the Michigan game, really. And they've had a real serious time. You go back to a Georgia game where they dominated the first half, couldn't put the ball in the end zone, they kicked a bunch of field goals. But really dominated the first half of that game and fell apart in the second. Arizona, if you watch that Arizona State in the first quarter after that, you were thinking, oh, this is going to be like 52-3. This is going to be a huge blowout. But following really the pattern of the whole Texas season, they get up 2 touchdowns and they fall asleep every time. On the other hand, probably the first game for Ohio State all year long where body for body, horse for horse, they're playing somebody with as much talent, particularly along both lines of scrimmage. And Texas has had moments where that defensive line has dominated quality offensive lines. And that is where Ohio State is weakest on the offensive side of the football. If it's how they're trying to talk you into taking Texas in the 6.5, I am not. I view this game right at the moment as needing a lot more examination. I'm not really heavy on putting out an opinion on this one right at the moment. As we get closer, obviously, with Phil, my initial instinct, the 53.5 is too low. I don't know if Texas is going to be able to match up on the outside with Ohio State. And obviously, we've seen the last 2 games, Ohio State has gone heavy to the outside, which is where the personnel is. On the flip side of the football, I do think the Texas offensive line will be able to deal with Ohio State's defensive front, which is what has put Oregon and Tennessee down in the last couple of games. Texas very strong on the offensive line, and I wouldn't be shocked if Quinn Ewers came out and put it together. He has had a tendency to do so, not in big games in terms of situations, but in terms of the big matchup. You go back to Alabama last year, you go to Michigan this year. When Quinn Ewers has been matched up against like a classic big name, other than Georgia, he's played very well. So my initial read on that would be look at the over. 53.5, a fairly big number if you're used to betting in the NFL. For college, that's really sort of like a medium number for 2 pretty potent offenses. So initial read there, not ready to pick a side yet, but 53.5 over would be my initial look at that game.
All right.
We've got a week to decide, so we'll definitely have a firmer opinion on that.
Yeah, and Ohio State certainly putting up points in bushels, 40 plus or whatever against Tennessee, and then coming right back and getting up 31-0 in their ball game this past weekend or Wednesday. So certainly looking like the total there might be a good look.
And by the way, again, if you are going to, that's too public. Everybody's going to bet the number. NFL this season, college this season, the public is dominating. The public side has been right over and over and over again. So.
All right, and we're getting a little bit of garbled video here, although hopefully the audio's
it's clear on my end, so I don't know.
Yeah, it was one of those things. I actually took an underbet on January 6th, being the first time we would experience some technical difficulties here on the show. But anyway, you're a little bit frozen up. I don't know if we can wade through the audio here and get an opinion on Penn State, Notre Dame. Notre Dame, I thought it was being largely overlooked. I wasn't sure they would hold up, but Freeman has made some suspect moves in the past. Maybe he's getting a little bit.
Made some yesterday.
Yeah, but he certainly has talent on his team. I'm a big fan of Riley Leonard. Jesus references notwithstanding. Nonetheless, the kid plays with a tremendous amount of heart and confidence, and very entertaining. And aside from the incessant religious references, is kind of an enjoyable interview after these ball games. So as much as we hated Rudy, you were just like me, screaming that he was offsides in the theater. He's offsides. Where's the flag? But yeah, rooting against Notre Dame with every fiber of my emotional makeup. I find myself enjoying this kid's play. Penn State, a team that I mean, could you have three teams that we despise more as Hurricane fans than Ohio State, Penn State, and Notre Dame all
It
involved?
would be hard.
My God, yeah, pretty tough. I mean, maybe the University of Florida, we'd throw them in there if the Gators were the other team instead of Texas. All right, what do you think? I mean, a razor thin margin here, 1.5 points. The early line with Notre Dame being the favorite.
I look at those two matchups that were played this week. Penn State kind of dominating Boise State, although a little deceptive. And then Notre Dame getting over Georgia, 13 is a very respectable win margin over Georgia. That said, not impressed with him, particularly offensively. In that game, you talked about Riley Leonard. He made a few crucial plays in terms of converting touchdowns. Excuse me. But you look at it overall, finished the game with 170 combined yards, 90 passing yards, to go along with 80 rushing yards. I thought their offensive line kind of got dominated in that game. And while Georgia obviously is as good a front seven as you will see in the country, Penn State's not that far behind. And then you look at the offensive. I think, and he's a kid I have not liked. I've said he's terrible in big situations. I will tell you, go back to the Big Ten title game where he played very well. Through the SMU game into Boise, Drew Aller has probably played, to my eye, the most three impressive games of his career on a streak going into this. So I'm leaning pretty heavy Penn State at this point. I think both sides of the ball sort of favor them. I think if you look at what Georgia's front seven did to Notre Dame, I don't think Penn State should lag very much. And then you look at that Penn State offense, having their quarterback, they're just a lot more balanced than Georgia was capable of being yesterday. And I did think Georgia's quarterback situation with the backup in was the deciding point in that Notre Dame Georgia matchup. Notre Dame's not going to have that advantage this time. I would say just my initial read, the line's off a few points. I would probably have started this game at like Penn State -2, -2.5. Instead, you're getting 1.5 with Penn State. So my initial read on this game, Penn State. I don't like the Nittany Lions. I don't like either of these teams. But I particularly have, made a lot of fun of Penn State in the post-Sandusky era. I don't like James Franklin, although I'm not wild about Freeman either, to be honest, in terms of decision makers.
Yeah.
But my initial lean would be pretty heavy Penn State in this matchup.
Right. Sounds good, Professor. Any lean towards who wins it all?
Winner of the Texas-Ohio State game, so I guess you probably have to lean a little bit towards Ohio State at 6.5. It's pretty hard to ignore what the Buckeyes have done the last couple of games.
Yeah, while Chip Kelly was in a straitjacket, they already put Ryan Day in a body bag as far as his career goes just a couple of weeks ago. So it'd be interesting if he went on then subsequently won the national championship in the original 12-team format. There'll be a lot of speculation. One final thing about the format and how it already needs change because the bye teams went bye-bye, all four of them. And so people...
There will be.
Yeah. Do you think it needs revision? Or, I mean, it's like anything. There's a cyclical nature in sports. Usually you're going to see conference champions be real powerhouses. That wasn't necessarily the case with 4 of the Power 5 conference champions this year. So... And you did have one of the teams go in undefeated, so to knock them off certainly was no small accomplishment. Do you really think it needs to be scrutinized, or is it just one of those things where in the first year there were some odd configurations based on the standards that they had set to set up the playoff?
It depends on what your goal with this is. If your goal is ratings and money, which I assume it is,
yeah.
The way you're going to create better games is by having less teams, not more teams. But we also know anything in sports only gets bigger. Playoffs only get expanded. They don't get contracted. I personally would leave it alone for a few years.
Yeah.
See how it plays out. And the reason for that is, look, yes, the first round was all ugly blowouts. The second round, every team that had a bye week lost. And
yes.
Again, there were a couple of ugly blowouts in the mix. But still, the underdog, the quote-unquote underdogs, not the point spread underdogs, but the lower seeded teams all won.
Right.
And then, I mean, if you want more competitive games, the easy place to start is no more of these home games in the first round. Make the first round neutral site games. But, in terms of expanding it, which people are already talking about doing, everybody you would have expanded it with to make a 16 team lost their freaking ball game. I mean, Alabama lost their ball game. That was a team everybody wanted in.
Yeah.
Ole Miss did win, but, they're playing Duke with a backup quarterback. Who's the other 3 losses? Oh, South Carolina.
Right.
Lost to Illinois, and lost to in Illinois in a situation where Illinois had many more important opt-outs than South Carolina did. So I would leave it alone for at least 4 or 5 years and let it see how it plays out. But again, if competitive games where you're looking at, the easy fix is to get rid of the home games in the first round.
Excellent stuff as always, Professor. Hopefully you fattened up your wallet a little bit.
A little bit.
Past week and ready for more action coming up. Always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for starting out 2025 right here on Bury Your Bookie. We'll talk to you again next week.
We'll see you, Deep.
All right. The Professor, ladies and gentlemen. It's always a little scary when cell phones first became popular, and I was doing talk radio over the many years that I had that experience. And your big fear was you would get a great guest on. You'd have Pat Riley be on a cell phone. And he's espousing philosophies that Nietzsche couldn't even come up with, talking about the game of basketball and making the natural parallels to life in general. And then you would experience the worst thing you ever could as a radio host, cell phone crap out. And it started to sound like a verbal ransom note. And you're thinking, what do I do? I mean, do I tell the guy to call back? If it got really bad, you would have to just say, hey, can hang up and call back. Now we're dealing with another element here, video. And once again, it kind of was like that video they had of Hank Aaron when he was congratulating Barry Bonds. And finally they pull back on breaking his all-time home run record, of course. And, Aaron had said, hey, I'm not following this schmuck around, this juice head. And I think it's absolute outrageous, that outrageous that you would even consider that I would want to acknowledge this. So then he makes the video, the obligatory video, and they pull back, and they had 2 guys with ski masks and machine guns held to his head. And then the video tends to get very grainy. That was a little bit of what we experienced there with the Professor. So technical difficulties, hopefully out of the way for 2025. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope you guys made a big score over the holiday. Don't do that accounting. I guess now with the accounts, I'm old school. Because I try to keep this somewhat in my head. And when you're on a losing streak. But very difficult to come out at the end of the year ahead. I know very few people that actually do that and have that experience. A few guys I know did very well this year, and most of the people spitting up a little bit of blood there. They're looking for the blood thinners, thinking they're about to have a heart attack and check out. So we got a long way to go in 2025. We'll resume our regular schedule, be with you 5 days a week right here on nofilter.net, and believe in the many other affiliates that carry the program, and hopefully give you some guidance, or maybe even we turn this into degenerate confessions. And at that point, we are leaning towards just giving out the phone number to call in on the show as 1-800-ADMIT-IT, which is a number my mother used to leave for me to call her back anytime that she gave me a call while she was with us. All right, guys, everybody, have a great week. Looking forward to a wide open week of NFL action. A lot of decisions to be made there because games are of enormous consequence for some teams and of no consequence whatsoever for others. And then there just are some flat out shit teams that stink. And I don't know what chance you give them of resurrecting and having whatever small amount of pride might be left. One of the classic examples involves the hometown team here in Miami, the Miami Dolphins, 1-point favorites over the Jets. The Jets annihilated last week a benching of Aaron Rodgers. The speculation is this will be Rodgers' last game as a Jet, maybe his last game ever. Do they rally around this? The Jets, who also, this has been an arch rivalry forever. Jet fans would say, as bad as their season is, if they could derail any chance the Dolphins had of making the postseason by beating them on the final day of the regular season, they would be more than happy to make that transpire. And then the Broncos, of course, would have to lose to the Chiefs' backups. But we've seen teams choke in that situation. 10.5-point favorites at home. All logic would lead you to believe that the Broncos will ice this game early and pour it on the Chiefs' backups. But stranger things have happened. You've seen teams and individual athletes that look like a veritable lock in spots, and only to see them stagger around there, much like the Colts did against the Giants last week, where they had to win to keep their playoff hopes alive against the worst team in the league, a team that was sitting on the number one draft pick. And what happens with a backup to the backup quarterback? The Giants prevail, put a ton of points on the board, and the Colts, whoosh, hasta la vista. So with the Dolphins, who had a 3.7% chance to make the postseason just a couple of weeks ago, are sitting there needing a win against the Jets and a Broncos improbable loss to the Chiefs' backups. And yet, you have to tread with a certain amount of caution, because what looks too good often is. And you would have to think that the Broncos laying 10.5 in that ball game would be a veritable cinch, and that the Dolphins have all the incentive in the world. Although they will be going in all likelihood with a backup quarterback in that game. So be careful. This Tyron Huntley, Snoop as he's known, local kid who's now playing for the Dolphins, had phenomenal Drew Brees-like numbers last week in terms of completion percentage, but yet you never thought the offense was really going anywhere with this guy. And they found themselves in a dogfight against the lowly Cleveland Browns. So anything can happen, that's for sure. But you would have to think the Dolphins playing with desperation would show something. And yet, if this is Aaron Rodgers' farewell swan song game as an NFL quarterback, who's going to pick him up next year? I can't imagine anybody would, really. Is there a team that thinks like the Jets did a couple of years ago, that they're a step away from a Super Bowl, just missing a quarterback? So let's take a shot with the old grizzled veteran who still might have something left in the tank. How'd that work out? Not very well. So good luck with all of your NFL plays, but be careful, because if it looks too good, if it looks like too much of a cinch, many times those are the games that come back to a snake bite you. All right, we'll see you next time. We'll see you on Monday. We'll get back to our 5-day-a-week schedule here on Bury Your Bookie for the people at NoFilter.net. Of course, Greenlight Ventures and Bet Online. I'm Jeff DeForrest. Thanks to the professor for joining us. Sorry about a little bit of the technical problem we had. And we will see you on Monday with the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.